Right, people, super smashing awesome. Welcome everyone to your Future Leaders Call. This is episode 73. After about 2 years, very graced and happy and with a lot of gratitude to have Richard next to me. Thank you very much, brother.
Thanks, man.
He's made the trip across the pond now, testing a new life out in new places.
No, just for this call.
Just for this call. Myself and Richard have been running Future Leaders for a long time, nearly 2 years, and we do it because of a simple basic premise that we believe in personal sovereignty, but financial sovereignty is like a gateway in. Once you most people will spend a bit of time or money trying to fix time and money problems. So financial sovereignty gives us a bit of an angle in, but from there, as you gain more financial sovereignty, it has a ripple effect in personal sovereignty, relationship sovereignty, all of these things. And we believe that this is the greatest transference of wealth the world has ever seen with a brand new asset class, and is a much fairer level playing field where people have the same opportunities to nurture and look after their funds, whether they've got $100 as the same opportunities as people who've got thousands and millions. We've never had that before with traditional finance. Most of society is locked out from some of the opportunities wealthier people have, let's say. So crypto creates a bit more of a level playing field around that point. And every couple of weeks, used to be every week, but now every couple of weeks, we run these calls as just open spaces to discuss that. We're not the oracles by any stretch of the imagination, but we have got experience in it and we really care about it. So we do these calls for free because we want to help people kind of move from the non-crypto space or not having that financial sovereignty into a space where they can have a greater sense of self and a greater sense of awareness around it. So we have a couple of new people on these calls. We've got two, I think. Yeah. We normally give a little bit of time at the beginning of the calls just to understand where any new people on the calls are. Just helps us understand what stretch we have. We have everything from people that are OGs in the space for years, all the way to people that are brand new. We're going to be discussing on this call though something which Heather brought up, which is around this concept of unbanking yourself. And I took it one step further to really think about it and go, well, everything that's going on in the world in all of its entirety has shaken a lot of trust in things which we have trusted most of our lives, or you've learned some new information and makes you question whatever it might be a little bit more, whether it's governments, banks, institutions, your mum, your friends, doesn't matter. So that's really the question we're saying, like in a world where things are shaking and in a world where we don't really know what to trust anymore necessarily, or we have different views of that trust, what do you do? Where do you put things? How do you make your next move? So that's the general crux for this call that we're going to be discussing, and that's thanks to Heather, who raised the question. But she's traveling and she said she would try to join. But before we do that, we have Melissa, who is with us. I'm going to come to you in a second, Melissa. You can have a couple of minutes to just share, but don't worry about wherever you are. Half the people on this call are either brand new or definitely were brand new, and some of the people on this call have been in it for a while. It doesn't really matter, or we have a common shared interest between us all. So my dear, if you were to illuminate us on your crypto journey or financial sovereignty journey, like where are you in your, how would you describe where things are at for you?
Thank you. Well, where are they right now? So I think the first thing that's very interesting to me is that in 2014, I think that was the first time I heard of crypto and looked into it and was super intrigued by it. And looking back, my intuition was just like, look at it. And I'm like, whatever, I don't know what to do with it. I never looked into it until the end of last year, I think around November. And that's when I started to really look into it and just start to understand it a little bit more and ask questions and start to invest like just a little bit to play with it more or less, and stayed with the whole topic in a way. And just for me personally, what I find most interesting is not only really the financial aspect of it, but really the whole world of possibility with the technology in itself. for so many areas of life, and especially when it comes to, our sovereignty in so many ways. Financially, obviously, that's like the obvious aspect, I guess, but so much more. And but still, it feels like there's so much that I don't know yet, and I really want to commit to it in a weekly or bi-weekly way to really learn more and really sit with it. Because for now it was just like, every other, I don't know, whenever I felt like it, I really dove deep for a couple of hours and then I forgot about it. And yeah, last week I watched a couple of your calls on YouTube, and I think it's amazing what you're doing here. And integrating the questions and the people with all different kinds of perspectives and questions and answers. And yeah, I hope that.
Very much, and it's really good to know that the videos that we post do get watched by other people, that they're useful. So thank you for sharing that. And I suppose doing it bit by bit is the simplest and easiest way. We often refer to this as being like a coffee percolator. It takes, can't just learn it on. It just takes drip by drip, because it's a crazy never-ending world of how far and how wide it can go. This is like looking at the internet.
Yeah.
And it impacts everything. So I think just starting somewhere and beginning there is the best place to be. I will preface off with this call, and this is to everybody, whether you're live on here or listening back. The discussion around unbanking yourself, or at least like, what do I do with the things? It's almost like, I suppose, self-preservation. Not from a selfish perspective, but as everything starts to change, you question things differently. Where do you live? Do you own a house? Do you rent a house? What do you do with the money that you've earned through working, through savings, through investments, all of these things? And so it can be a wobbly discussion, because we're discussing the things that either you're thinking about and don't have an answer to, or you've chosen to not think about, or didn't even think about them, which is also, you don't know what you don't know, do you?
And then you add all the complexity and choice around crypto, and which cryptos do you go for? Is it NFTs? Is it this, that, or the other? Wallets? You add all that to the mix and it gets really overwhelming, doesn't it? So
easily, very, very fast. So I share all that because I want everyone to know that it's an open call. We can discuss everything, and if it makes you feel uncomfortable, chuck it in the mix, because if we can't start to feel comfortable about something and about our own decisions, we just won't make one. And that is a lot of society, to be fair. We sit on that fence because we have all sorts of conflicting information. So it's just a safer space as we can have to discuss these sorts of things.
Have you got a question, Melissa, at all that you'd like to follow up, like, us to address?
I think for now, no, I think I shared one in the when I signed up around NFTs, because I feel that's again something what I just recently looked into. I feel like I still don't get it. And I spent hours looking into it.
I don't think do we? So there's too much. There's so much hype around it at the moment. So lots of different directions you go with. So we'll touch on that if we can, I guess, won't we?
Yeah, I mean, we'll bring it all in. There's definitely other calls where we've discussed them at more detail, but let's have a see where it goes to. So let us just have a quick look. I know that someone else, there's Heather's question. They're in here. Before then we dive into it, Paul, Louise, Beth, Rebecca, Paul A and Paul 1, sorry. Do you guys have anything in particular that you want to see if we can just weave into this discussion? Anything you've come here that you'd love a little bit more discussion on? Paul, I know you asked about, you said Zoom API. I assume you mean Zort API.
Yeah, absolutely. So that I appreciate my question probably will not sit elegantly with the unbanked theme. Mine was like really probably quite boring, quite technical, which is what on earth do you put in these boxes? I've got so far, but like, yeah, but now I've run to a complete halt with Zort, and it's
okay.
Yeah.
We can cover that fairly quickly anyway.
If you can put finances out of a bank account into somewhere else where you can earn interest or whatever, I mean, it plays into the unbanking system a little bit, I guess. So we can probably touch it.
We can cover it. The security is going to be a big one on here anyway, and API's going to it. So that's absolutely fine. Louise, Beth, thumbs up if you're good, or do you unmute yourself if you got something you'd love to ask? Moving along, Rebecca, Good. Paul, you know, if you can say something anyway. And Elaine, as ever, that's why any questions, and she writes everything. What do you want to learn about? Everything. So a little bit more detail on that in future, and we can definitely illuminate it more. So, well, let's go really quickly then. So Heather asks, basically, how do I unbank myself? And is there a thread to follow within that? So let's just first ask, without explaining it, who would not know what unbanking oneself would be? Raise your hand so I can see. Everyone got a good enough summary of it? Cool. All right, in that case, then I'm going to pick on somebody. I'm not going to pick on Louise at that single moment, but I'm going to come to Paul. How would you explain Paul 1, which is Crudgington? How do you explain unbanking yourself?
I guess for me, it would be having the majority of your financial interests outside of the traditional fiat system. You know, so whether that's the bulk of your savings, whether there's a way that, you know, your wages or whatever can be paid into a non-high street bank. That's how I would define it.
Cool. I'd probably take it one step further as well and include the buying and the spending of what you need for life to be paid for outside of traditional finance. So traditional finance is bank accounts, credit cards, PayPals, basically anything that uses fiat currency, meaning pounds, sterling, dollars, things like that. So that is in effect her question and discussion, but it presupposes, well, why would you want to unbank yourself? And that's what I wanted to go back to. People are talking about this idea of unbanking yourself because the trust that we had 10 years ago or 20 years ago about banks and governments is very different from today. And whether you're an investor, whether you're a person on the street, it doesn't really matter where you're at. We all have got new views, just like we have got new views of the media compared to 25, 30 years ago. So there reaches a point, I premise, that when our views of these things change so much, it makes us question, what are we doing and why are we doing it? There may be people on this call that have dealt with, send the passcode from the meeting ID on the chat. There might be people on this call that deal with, from the investment perspective, rebalancing, and we use this term a store of value. So in times of uncertainty, when inflation is going up, that means $100 doesn't buy you as much. Where deflation is occurring, where the price of a house goes from 200 grand to 150 to 100. People often start to move their assets and their wealth into things which are stores of value, meaning that when all this is happening or all this is happening, this will ride it out. And historically, that's always been, for the most part, gold. Gold and maybe like bits into silver. Silver moves a little bit more than gold. But that's been the biggest store of value for years. But as everything's moving right now, we've got a potential of hyperinflation. We've got a potential that deflation is happening at the same time. I don't think that word you used earlier was true.
Stagflation.
Is that what it's called?
Not yet, but possibly, yeah.
What, if you keep saying it?
Stagflation.
Did you hear it from somewhere?
No, it means exactly that. Deflation of assets, I think, and inflation of
so that
cash,
means the money that
basically.
we've got can't buy as much. And the assets that you've got, houses, crypto, maybe even gold, goes down and down and down. So in those instances, where do you move things? What do you do with it? And I'd love at some point, Paul, because I know that you do bits of asset investing. I'd like your take on it as well, if you're cool to just begin to think about that. And then you've got someone like Heather, who, and I wish she was on this call, but I'm just going to have to make stuff up as I go along. I've met other people that want to move into this unbanking space, but they're wanting to move their funds out of this traditional system into another system, which at the minute would only be crypto, because if you're looking to buy and spend, and you know, it's very difficult to walk around with gold coins. We then have a whole question on trust. And we've got this fiat system here on one hand, and we've got this crypto world on the other hand. And you're beginning to ask the question, do I trust this more than I trust that? And you can have 10 people in a room, 5 of them will say, keep 90% of your money in fiat, because the crypto world's incredibly volatile. And you could have another 10 people in the side of the room going, take all your money out of the banking system because it's it's corrupt and I don't trust it long term. I'd rather put my money and hedge my bets in this crypto world. And the big question is who's right and who's not right. And it's an existential question. There's no answer to this than the answer you prescribe. And it really comes down to your beliefs. And it comes down to the world that you're in. But we want to kind of open that up to just have a seat.
I think people, we all grow up, you get given your first bank account. In the UK, we used to get given a NatWest China piggy bank. I mean, I'm old enough to remember them from the 80s.
I think I still have that.
And so,
I remember the song from the advert.
Yeah. So you're encouraged to get into the banking system from a really early age, and you don't even realize it's happening around you. You just end up being pushed into it. And we build up this trust around banks, don't we? And the curtain is opening for people now in terms of around that. But I just looked up a definition of unbanked. And the traditional one is an informal term for adults who do not use banks or banking institutions in any capacity. Unbanking persons generally pay for things in cash or else purchase money orders or prepaid debit cards. And the reason I mention that is just because Dan introduced me to a guy who lives in Mexico here, who says he's been unbanked for 40 years, but he's moved to crypto. So he has dealt with himself in that way because he made a decision that long ago based on his own personal circumstances to sort of operate in cash and prepaid cards, and he's got lots of investments as well. So he's made it work for him, but it was based on his personal decision and his personal viewpoint on how he wanted to live. I think, we're on a crypto predominant call here, and there are options that I suppose we're going to talk about where you can move out of that because and into unbanking solutions within crypto. So it's not a new concept, is it? Unbanking. That's the point I'm making, I guess. But there's more options for us to move into that space now.
I think for lots of people, until crypto came along, there wasn't an alternative. Okay, obviously the guy that I introduced you to, he chose that route for various reasons, and will have weathered a lot of convenience, inconvenience, I suppose, in exchange for what he deems to be a benefit. And this is what this comes down to. Like they always say within food, you've got it's some sort of triad of quality, cost, and convenience. And if you want one of them, something else has to waver. And society, whether we like it or not, we are wired for convenience. We will click the accept button because we're not going to read it all, and we want whatever's being served to us, whether it's Facebook, whether it's the new installation of your operating system or your phone, all these things. And the way that society keeps moving, whether it's food, look at the convenience now of food with Rappi and Just Eat and all of these food delivery services. Things become easier and easier. And this whole question of gaining sovereignty of yourself, sovereignty of finances, basically means varying levels of accepting inconvenience. Because society, if you just follow the societal norm, the convenience that's served to you from whatever institution it is, governments or banks, that means you're handing over that sovereignty, you're handing over the thinking of it all. And along with that means you accept the way in which they work. So there's also a guy called the Bitcoin Family guy, or Bitcoin Family, and he sold all of their assets 5 years ago-ish into Bitcoin, and they travel the world fully, only living off Bitcoin and only living off cryptocurrencies. And it was really interesting meeting him and speaking to him about what he does. But I suppose before we kind of delve into a few pieces of things, I'm just interested to know, I need to get my charger in a second. I'm just interested to know from people on this call, who has had their belief in, let's just say banks for now, the belief that you entrust and are happy to entrust the lion's share of your funds for them to look after. Who's had that wavered a bit, that they are questioning that or further? Just curious. If you can either raise your hand or click the little handy button. Just 2, 3, 4. Okay, cool. Alan's raised his hand. Right, brilliant. So that's most people. So then that moves us on to a question then, because I do this with some things. I'm like, okay, I've had this wavered. How much does it need to be wavered before you'll do something? this is the thing I ponder and struggle with all the time, regardless. Like even moving out here to Mexico, and I think a little bit yourself, at some point, when do I take action? So I would love to know if someone is happy to share for a minute, like, and it's just openly, because we don't have the answers, but through discussion and dialogue, we can kind of find them. Does anyone wish to share, like, how much that's wavered them and how far they've begun to think about solutions, whether it's where you store your money or whether it's how you're going to operate this idea of unbanking yourself? Anyone care to share? All good? No takers? It's not a collaborative call unless we collaborate.
Come
I'll
on.
carry on.
I'm happy to jump in for a couple of minutes and give you a few thoughts.
All one.
So I mean, we were reflecting on this actually going into Brexit because the industry that we're in was quite affected by the prospect of Brexit. So we kind of restructured things to make sure that we were hedged against, like, I would say, a fairly modest risk of bank failure, but a risk that would inevitably exist. So, I mean, I think it's a very real thing. I mean, there's some very practical things, like only a relatively small amount of money is actually secured in a bank that is covered by insurance. So, you know, if you're in a transaction or, you know, you've sadly lost a relative, you know, you might be in quite a vulnerable position. And I think if you look at like all the great families who've survived through, you know, the wars, how have they survived? It's mostly through real estate, gold, artwork, collectibles. You look at, you know, the fate of the Jewish people and how they, you know, they managed to preserve their wealth. You know, a lot of that was through diamonds, for example, people smuggling diamonds. I mean, so, you know, we've got a history, haven't we, of people taking this seriously. I think the only kind of final points I'd make is, you know, look what happened to Greece. You know, bank depositors in Greece had their bank deposits seized over 100,000 euros. If that's your life savings, if that's everything your family has ever worked for, I mean, that's a pretty soul destroying thing. I mean, that destroys your individual sovereignty. I think the last thing I'd say is, well, being part of the unbanked, maybe, and I say this with love and respect for everybody on the call, but it's a luxury for us to make the decision. If you look at the rest of the world, the vast majority of people in the world are unbanked. And why are they unbanked? It's because it is not profitable for banks to offer them services. They just will never make enough money from them ever to be worthwhile opening an account. So it's interesting, our perspective of unbanking ourselves. And you think about, you know, look at El Salvador, the armies of people who are unbanked through choice.
There, and it's really important to bring in, and that's why earlier, like, I paused when I said the word self-preservation. It is self-preservation, but at the same time, one of the things you have on this call is around the bigger goals. This whole idea of
Daniel, your thing's not coming through, audio's not coming through. I think it's just, maybe just, I don't know.
Plug it back in. Does it work now? Am I on now?
No, not really.
Go two.
I heard that.
Let's have a look. Tell me if we're back in. One,
Yeah.
two, one,
Hey,
two.
You're on.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I can't hear people. Someone
No.
say hello.
I can hear. Yeah.
Paul, say hello.
Hello, can you hear us?
Okay.
Aloha.
So,
You want to run then as well, mate?
oh, it's cool. Don't worry. I don't want to be in a run if no one can hear me. At the end, I'm like, that was so profound. Everyone's like, what did you say? Paul makes a really good point with it all. Like, it's the same thing when I went to India. Like, when I went, everybody just wanted 40, 50-inch TV screens, 4K, 10K, like, wrap around everything. And they'd have one bed for 5 of them, but a big satellite dish outside. And you go to India and all you see is a lot of white Western people going to India to find themselves. And a lot of Indians want to get out of India and go to the the Western world to make it.
Buy stuff.
And I found that dichotomy really interesting, really fascinating, how like everyone almost perceives this other side sometimes, or this other way of being, whether it's older and want to get back to it, or whether it's more forward thinking, this idea of unbanking yourself. But really you're going back to true sovereignty. But it is a most of the decisions I make today are some of the most privileged decisions I could ever make. And I think having that awareness is super important. But if anything, what I really like from Paul's comment, it also adds fire to this idea that this thing we're trying to move away from, potentially, or certainly on this discussion on this call, this banking industry, is already by definition unfair. Like it's already causing huge differences in opportunity around the world. But then through that strife, you've got some of the greatest mobile applications for transferring the funds that have come through from within Africa. Like some of these places are more connected and can move their monies around and to other individual people easier than we can in our developed world. And so I think that all the way through society, as we move through cycles, we kind of go into a dip, and then whilst in that dip, relearn something that brings us all back around. But when we come back around, it has a new flair to it, a new space within it. So if we
Well, I'd say as well, it's like you have to look at what is banking actually for, you know, because as I was saying, the point I was making earlier is we just fall into it, right? We just fall into it, and we think that's where, I mean, ultimately, traditionally it's where we would have stored our wealth. But then, if your wealth is just in fiat or pounds or whatever it is, your local currency, and then your belief in that currency is getting wavered, and your belief in the banking system is getting wavered, then, I mean, we were talking about it earlier, is that we'll follow this thread, I guess, is what Paul was saying was, you don't just keep the reason we're all sitting on this call is we don't want to keep just our wealth in fiat, right? We want to move it into other things, whether it's hard assets like gold and diamonds or whatever it might be, or crypto, right? And then there's all this facility around being able to unbank yourself within it. So I think your point earlier is like you're re-examining really what's important to you, because everyone on this call has said we don't really trust the banks. Our awareness of how banks operate has changed, and so we're making a decision around that. So, so looking at that question in the first instance, what was a bank for? It is really important, because it allows you then to look at, well, what you've got and how you want to redistribute it, so that you can protect yourselves in one instance.
In essence, all the bank does is hold your money.
Exactly, it's just your wealth.
Allow you to spend it.
Yeah, exactly. And you're talking about, I mean, I've used more cash in the last week living in Mexico than I have in the last 2 years, right? I haven't used cash, but I use cash here. And there's a reason for that, is because people want to be unbanked in a different way, you know. But yeah, all a bank is for is it's a word at the end of the day, but you need to decide, look at your own circumstances, to your point, and really decide exactly what a bank means to you, because it will really engage the decision you make around how to be unbanked.
So then, if we split banking into those two areas, one is the protection of assets. So on the one hand, banks, you put your money in it and they look after it. This is the dead simple MO for a bank, in my opinion. They look after it. And we think that in times of hardship, that you would be covered. Now, depending on what country you're in, that varies wildly. I thought in the UK, it covers 75% up to the value of 200k. That's what I had in my head.
I think it's 75k.
75k.
Yeah.
So they'll cover up to 75k. What? 100%
on one bank account. Yeah.
Which means on one bank
account. So 75k per bank account.
So if I had 4 bank accounts, 75k,
yeah,
they're all covered. Okay.
Yeah. If you have 200k in one bank account, you'll get 75k.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Paul, would you generally agree with that? You've obviously looked at this stuff. Kathy thinks it's 85k per institution. What do you mean by per institution?
HSBC, Barclays.
Each bank, each one you're in. I'm sure it's 85 is the threshold that you actually have that protection. So it's
then
85 each.
if I have 3 bank accounts with HSBC, then I am as an entity and covered up to 85k total. Is that
As
what
far as I know, it's per institution, but I would, check
Okay.
that out. I think it's per institution, so I think it's like the collective.
Yeah.
So HSBC would be 85, Barclays 85.
Okay, cool. And Paul's just posted some stuff up there. Protected by 25k UK establishment. So, and it will depend on what country you're in, and it will depend on various factors. But the reality is, for most people on the street, they're going to be covered because most people don't sat there with 85k in a bank account. So it does cover most people on that side. So then if we think about a bank as being something where we put our stuff and we store it there, now we'd like the bank to give us something in return. I remember growing up, I remember like 4, 5, 6% in like an ISA and stuff. Now, I think we're pretty much well under 1% across the board, and in America even less. So that second part where a bank's going to make it do something is maybe less important. So we're just looking at the security side. So then for about 20 minutes then, what I would love to do is just discuss the different places where whether you're choosing to unbank yourself, and just because I want to move away from banks, or whether you're just choosing to just split assets and wealth around so that you can feel a greater sense of security. Where could we put them and how could we put them there? So we're going to go around in a circle. If you don't know one when it comes to, that's fine. Paul, if you had somewhere else, Paul 1, Lanfear, if you had somewhere else to put your assets, one place, what would be, that's not cash in a bank, where would you put it?
So, I mean, if you wanted to be like completely analog, you could buy yourself gold coins, for example.
I like that. Gold coins are always good. Gold coins have been the store of value for like 5,000 years. They are fairly portable. Bearing in mind that a gold coin, a 1 ounce gold coin that's about the size of let's say a UK 50p, they're about 3.5 grand at the minute. So in that single thing there is 3.5 grand, and you can buy 1/10 of it. You can buy cheaper coins. I think the cheapest you can buy a coin is 1/10 of a sovereign for about 70 quid, 50 quid, something like that. So a sovereign can be split down into tenths and goes up to like 300-400 quid, whatever it is for a tenth times 10. And then you can get Britannias, which are 1 ounce coins, and they are about 3 grand, and they can go down to 1/10, like 300 a coin. So I would say between gold coins, that's a fairly standard answer. You don't need a lot of gold coins to hold a lot of value. What would be your top tip or top place if someone said, "Oh, I'm interested in buying some gold coins"? How would they go about it, do you think? That's Paul.
Oh, so there's lots of places you can get them from. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't buy them off eBay necessarily. So you can go like to the Royal Mint. In fact, you can go and visit the Royal Mint in Wales and have a look around. And I would highly recommend that. It's actually really interesting. Like particularly if you've got kids, they really like. It's really interesting. So you can get them direct from the Royal Mint, or you can go. There's a website called Bullion by Post. That's probably the one which I think is probably most useful in the UK.
Yeah, cool. So it's super easy to buy gold coins. And then you're speculating a little bit more on things like silver, the price. You talk about the ratio of how many silver coins does it make to make a gold coin. And in the past, it used to be like this. Right now, there's quite a big gap, which means you could argue that silver is underpriced. But you're speculating a little bit more on it, and there's other metals as well that people can buy. So we're discussing here storing of value outside of a fiat system. Good thing about coins as well, if there is a cyber pandemic, if the internet collapses and all sorts of other stuff, which I guarantee if that happens, we have got way bigger worries than where your assets are. But your gold coin is a gold coin physically somewhere. Cool, thank you, Paul. I'm coming to Melissa, then Beth, then Rebecca, Kathy, Paul, Elaine. So Melissa, sorry, I was reading something there. Alan says when Prince Philip visits the Royal Mint, he described a town in which is situated as a hole with a mint. Oh, Prince Philip definitely had a way with words. So Melissa, what do you think would be, you've got some money, you've only got a month, you're moving out the banking system, you can't buy gold, what would you buy?
I would buy land, I guess.
Land.
That's actually what I'm planning. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Land's always a good one. They say on average land doubles every 10 years. What would be the downside in buying land?
The downside. I mean,
Everything.
there's much.
I don't know,
I mean, you need to take care of it in some way, probably. I don't know.
When you say land, do you mean land or do you mean property?
No land. I mean, what is like in English? What's property? What is land?
Well, land would be the thing that the property is built upon. So some people buy land.
Oh no, land.
Okay, land. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I would actually probably say land holds its value better than a property. I can't prove that, but I have I've got some friends who only buy land and then they lease the land out and people will build on top of it. Okay, cool.
Can't spend land though.
You can't spend land. It's true. So
Yeah,
if you're
so
going to
I
tie up your money in it,
Yeah, but you know, if everything goes down, you can live on your land with some birds,
True.
friends.
this is one of the questions around the banking itself. We have a guy in the community here who always says, what's the threat vector? It's like, what are you actually protecting against? And so some people on this call might be like, well, I'm cool with my assets, but I'd just like to diversify it a bit more so it's not all in the bank. Cool. And I'm going to speak for Heather because she's not here. But like Heather might be wanting to unbank herself because she just completely disagrees with the banking industry, the fiat industry, in which case she wants to be totally out of it and living. And so buying a piece of land might tie up too much funds and not be suitable for her. So land isn't as liquid, but over the course of time is a pretty tried and tested store of value. But if an economy collapses in a local area, I'm thinking of South Africa at the minute. I don't know if people are aware, but I've got friends who've got properties in South Africa, and they just won't sell them. The price that they can sell that property for is so cheap that it wouldn't be worth it. It's better for them to hold on to it. So they might have spent 150K buying in there. Right now they can sell it for 50. They don't want to take that hit. So they've got the land, but that money is tied up in that land until an economy recovers.
So by definition, you're unbanked, but it's the definition by which you need to live that really dictates your decision in that area, I'd say.
Cool. So Louise and Beth, you've got two brains behind that microphone. You two, you can't buy land, you can't buy gold. What would you pick?
Property, probably.
Property. So you're going to build on Melissa's land, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. I think you got to negotiate well and get a good deal. So property. All right, cool. You're already in property. So what do you think's your plus and your upside and your downside?
Well, my kind of strategy is to buy and hold long term, which I think looking at the price of property over the last 20, 30, 40 years has just like gone up exponentially. So I suppose the money you'll be getting more like gains through capital appreciation than you'd get interest in the bank. And then if you were to rent it out, which is like our strategy as well, then you'd get money. But I suppose if we weren't banking, they'd have to like pay me in crypto or something.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we're going to come on to at the latter part of this call is like, how does this unbanked money move around? I'm going to play a really harsh devil's advocate card, but it's based on Paul's privilege card. I'm fairly confident everyone on this call has never lived through a property crash in their economy, or has somebody.
We probably live.
Friend of mine has.
Yeah, young.
Yeah.
Go on, Alan.
A friend of mine has, and he aged about 20 years in a year.
Where was this?
It was, most of the properties were around Stockport. He inherited it off his dad with massive negative equity.
Yeah.
And his dad died suddenly, unexpectedly, and he inherited the lot. And he aged, honestly, he aged terribly in a year.
It's a lot of additional stress. This is the thing about money. On the one hand, people are like, oh, it's just money, which it is. It's a tool, but at the same time, it has such a grip on so much within society. I wish Andy was on this call. Andy's unfortunately not going to be making any of the calls for a while. But she is Hungarian, and there was another woman that had been on the calls as well and came from, I can't remember which country, but they'd gone through, one woman had gone through 2 currency collapses. So one when she was a kid, and all the money, she just remembers her mom, money was worthless. It was down to objects, things, trading to just live. They left, they went to another country, a South American country, where again, currency went to 0. In this country as well, property prices went to 0. And so she came on the call, and for me, it's a really humbling experience. She's like, none of you have ever felt what it feels like to wake up and know your money is worthless. And to know that your house, other than obviously the value of living and being in a house, has no additional value outside anywhere. No one's buying and no one's selling. And I can't understand it because I've never been through it. I can logically, on paper, make sense of it. But I put it in here because we as majority of people on this call who are all UK based, I think, never experienced it. And so I put that in just as a bit of sense making, because when we talk about downside, and I'm using Louise's comment earlier, which she said, well, you know, historically prices have gone up and up and up. They totally have. And do I think if the UK got hit with an economic disaster that hit property, do I think they recover? Yeah, it's an island. We can only build so many houses on it, and it will always, at the minute, seem to attract people. So I do think long term it can still be good, but I do think it's prudent to just factor it in. If you're a long termer, you can deal with the interest rates that might change within that, and that's totally fine. I had an advisor once who advised me to always try and get your properties down to 60% loan to value. Because he said at 60%, even if you're quite a deep correction, you can still get a mortgage. You're not necessarily in negative equity. You can still cover the payments. So I just share that as one person's advice towards me, and just that awareness of any assets we're buying. If things are in unprecedented times, if there are chances of economic collapses, currency collapses, then in theory, anything that's tied to the value of fiat may also experience it as well. Cool. Sorry if that scares you, Louise or Beth. I know nobody ever wants to hear that, but we're not here to stroke people's back necessarily. Rebecca M.
Did Beth have anything, by the way?
Oh, I kind of can't. I don't want to pick on Beth. Do you want to chip one in, or you tag it on the back of Louise's?
Yeah, I'll just tag in on the back.
Tag on. All right. Because you don't want to take them all, so that Rebecca can still have one. Rebecca, what would be? You can't buy property or land. It's cornered by Melissa and Louise. Paul's got all the gold. What are you going to buy?
Well, I'm still learning about it, but I think Zort.
I love it. Go on. Okay. Zort coin or Zort platform?
Oh, coin. Oh, can I buy the whole platform?
No, you can. For those that are listening, Zort is a platform that has an AI trading system that trades your money. Zort also is a token you can buy. They're 2 different things. So are you talking about putting your money somewhere and earning from it? Or are you talking about buying a coin and hoping that the price increases?
I don't know. Earning from it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's liquid.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the risks are it's sort of online based, so if all of that crashed in some way.
So would you move all your cash, well, a proportion of your current that's in your bank account into Zort? You know, is that what you're saying in terms of how you're looking at it?
Yeah.
So then from that thinking, so again, just so I was clear, so she's talking about moving fiat money, cryptovizing it, so it's in the crypto space, putting it in a platform. In this instance, it's Coinbase, and Zort is an API. Nice segue into Paul's question in a minute. And this API has permission to trade the money in here. And it buys a coin, sells a coin, and keeps increasing the amount of capital. So that capital that's in Coinbase is a stable coin, which is a crypto version of fiat pegged 1-to-1. So when we start thinking about the downsides, what could be the downsides of doing that if we're moving into more space of loss of trust? What would you say the downside is, Rebecca? If you can't work it, that's cool.
If what, sorry?
If you can't think of what it might be, don't worry. But what do you think?
I could forget my password. That seems to be my biggest.
You could. There are some technical things, but from an economic perspective, if we have a, this is a big discussion right now, but if you've got $100,000 in USDC, which is a stable coin, pegged 1-to-1 with the dollar, the value of the dollar inflates or deflates or crashes or whatever, what happens to that stable coin? What happens to the value of that if you wanted to come out of it? Does that kind of make sense?
If the dollar crashes, then that also crashes. The value of that would crash simultaneously.
Well,
who knows?
We don't. Nobody knows. Like, it's never. We have no history of this. There's no answer to it, but it definitely is something that you need to be aware of. So I'm aware of the money I have in Zort. Okay, it's not fiat, but it's a stable coin. And on the 27th of this month, the USA are going to release a law. Is it a law or a bill?
Infrastructure bill advice, yeah.
It's called the infrastructure bill, and it contains all sorts of stuff. But at the minute, it's pretty. It could be fairly detrimental for crypto, because they didn't bring in that change, did they?
No, they haven't brought the change in the update to it. It's specifically going to target stable coins. I think that's really what they're going to target. Whether securities, whether they want to regulate them and all the rest of it, basically. So, yeah, there's some.
Now, this is only for America, not for the rest of the world. But I know that Americans think America is the rest of the world, and the rest of the world forgets that America thinks that. However, America does have a fair punchy weight. When they throw a rock or a ripple, it has a big ripple effect around the world. 2009 financial crash is a perfect example of that. So whilst they aren't the world, they do have a fair say in knock-on effects. So when this comes into play, no one truly knows what it will mean. Will it just mean a bit more regulation and there's a bit more auditing? Will they be banned or outlawed? Or we don't know. But then if that happens and you've got your money sat in a stable coin, what does that mean? And that's one of these questions why we wanted to discuss it today, because if we're thinking about this, do we make some changes? Do we not make some changes? Do we just keep our ear firmly to the ground and just listen? So that would be the downside, certainly as I see it. And I think yourself, like if you're using something like Zort, and I use Zort quite a lot, it's just thinking about that. What is the tie between this stable coin I've got in the crypto world and the outside world?
I think where we're getting to is just the idea of zooming out and looking at, if you've got a big chunk of cash in the bank and you're wondering what to do it, should I go invest in NFTs? Should I go and invest in X coin? Should I put it all in Bitcoin or whatever? It's trying to build that picture of what is it we actually need to survive, to pay bills, all the rest of it, and sort of start thinking about, well, right now, all my cash is sitting in the bank. What possibly ways could I split things out so that, and put it into different places and different assets or different forms of money that you deem as money, and really start thinking about building something that's, think of it as like a pie. Which parts of the pie do you want to have in certain areas? So I think, these are all qualified and good answers based on everyone's current thinking at the moment. But I think it's where we're trying to get to encourage is just really, you've got everyone on this call has got awareness that we don't want to keep our money necessarily in a bank. Yeah. We don't want to necessarily keep it in fiat. We want to move into those other things. And what's the kind of the balance of these things? So you don't want to move everything from, well, you might want to, but our advice and our preference would be, you don't want to move all your money into your bank and stick it into one possible thing. I know we're playing this game at the moment in terms of where do people think the best place to put money in. But I think, just to sort of drill down a little bit, we need to sort of zoom back out and really sort of start thinking in those terms, basically, because you don't want to move into one thing and recreate all the risk in one place, you know.
Yeah, and crypto would be an example as well of one thing.
Yeah.
Because even though you can split stuff within crypto, Zoet's still within crypto, and having a crypto portfolio is within crypto. I'm quite heavily leveraged into crypto myself, and so one of my questions is like, because we don't know this, how much of an influence does the real world have in the crypto world? I've met people, we were talking about this today, that in the event of a big collapse, and there are people there's always people talking about big collapses, but if the price of money, purchasing power as we call it, like how much a loaf of bread costs you, if purchasing power keep going up and things cost more and more, if assets keep going down, and at the same time global economy moves in some sort of recession, do people take all of the money out of crypto, or do people look at crypto and just all the money starts to roll up to the very top, to Bitcoin and Ethereum? Like we don't know. This comes down to trust, because if you've got people like, for me, I would definitely start to move stuff into Bitcoin. Maybe Heather, who was on the call, would do the same, and who started this conversation. But then someone else, well, I would love to ask if someone is on this call, if all of a sudden there truly was an external global collapse happening of some description, and you've got 50 grand and 25 grand of that is in your bank and 25 grand is in crypto. Show of hands, who would move that money out of crypto? Raise your hand if you'd take the money out of crypto. It's your money, 25K in each. Okay, raise your hand if you'd keep the money in crypto. Well, okay, cool. Then just curious, you've got all your money in crypto. It's split across the board from Bitcoin, Ethereum, down and down and down. You've got a few alts, everything like that. You might only have 5 grand in Bitcoin. Would you just leave the whole thing and let it run? Or would you, I'll ask one question. Raise your hand if you'd start to move it all up to bigger coins. Okay. Cool, thank you. Raise your hand if you just leave it because you think you just weather the storm and they'll come back up in the future. All right. So what are bigger coins? Top 10 coins. Bitcoin and Ethereum are the number 1 and number 2 coins by how much money is locked in them. There's 10,000 coins. So if you're holding some actual shit coin, meme coin, like let's, Dogecoin to the moon meme coin, rather than, I shouldn't have said Dogecoin, but there's just meme stock coins which don't do anything. They just sound good and people buy them. And there's companies that are trying stuff. But as you get higher to the top of the list are coins that are in use and operating every day. So that's what I mean by I say bigger coins. Understand about top 10. Cool. All right. Go on, Lucy.
Can't remember, sorry.
Okay. So crypto.
That was what I was going to say. We didn't talk about it, but would everyone still feel the same if they're in crypto, they've built a portfolio up and they've ridden it and they see, we're in a good space here. The value of portfolio is rising and we have a 95% crash.
95%.
Let's go to, well, yeah.
That means your 50K Bitcoin is now 2,500.
That's going to hurt, but to really stab the point home, would everyone still be glad they had held on to stuff then? Or would they wish they'd kind of took a little bit of profit?
Beth's wavering a little bit. Paul would buy more. All right, we've got a third poll. So historically, the deepest correction we've had is 80%. Yeah. Yeah. So in 2013, that's the big one where it went down to like cents again. Basically, we've had an 80% correction.
2017 as well, I think, wasn't it?
So we've had that 80. Yeah, it was 2017. So like that means your 50K coin is worth 10 grand. Like imagine if you woke up tomorrow and you saw a $10,000 Bitcoin. Now just understand that when we see a $10,000 Bitcoin, you're seeing a $300 Ethereum, $500 Ethereum. Like just imagine those sorts of prices. And right now you think you'd buy more. I definitely have Park Smith will buy more, but it's also think about how many people would go out. Because actually you'd be surprised how many people buy high and sell low.
2017, everyone left crypto. You know what I mean? So everyone that was new to crypto left crypto. So it's a different space now. But no, I don't think many people on this call have gone through that psychological shift. I mean, I got into crypto 2016, rode it up, and rode it back down again. You know, so I've felt it to some degree, but I wasn't as in deep as I am now, and didn't have the knowledge I did. But
Kathy makes a good point here. It depends what strategy you put behind it, but that presupposes you have a strategy, and that's one of the things we try and talk about here. Why are you here? It's the first thing on the 9-part module that we've made. It's the second thing, and which is like, what do you want? Are you here because you're just diversifying your assets? Are you here because you're anti-governmental and want to, you know, to give a big fuck you and leave? Are you here because you're just interested in new tech and think it's really interesting? Like, you need to know why you're here. And this conversation in particular, if you're thinking about protection and diversification and unbanking yourself, whatever, you need to really be clear on what am I protecting against? What is the threat vector? What is the threat angle I'm trying to prevent or mitigate against? Because then the answer, when we're talking about it riding, you need to already be thinking about that in advance, especially if you're going to move your money into it. Now, the Bitcoin family guy, he rides it. He's cool, knowing he's made his bet. He has planted his flag in Bitcoin. He is not interested really in any other coins. He's anti-XRP. He's Bitcoin through and through. He'll trade bits of other things, but only to buy more Bitcoin. His long-term belief is that Bitcoin will hold value. He is considering it the modern digital store of value. So that means that because he's planted that flag firmly, his decisions are actually relatively simple because he's made his bet. And I think that's what's missing sometimes is we've never had to make a bet before. We just had the banks. There wasn't even an option B. And in some places, in some countries, they didn't ever have option A, like Paul referred to earlier. So when this thing that we've planted our money into will be cool with for ages, when that's gone, we're basically walking around with flags, kind of going, what do I do with this? Because we've never staked our claim before from a financial sovereignty perspective. So that's the big thing in crypto is, yes, you can move it into there, you could use Zort, but there are questions which, at least if you think about them today, if there was a crash and the money leaves, what am I doing? If it peaks, am I going to take some of that peak and move it? Or am I riding this for 10 years because I'm comfortable with whatever else I've got?
I think as well, what we're really trying to encourage here is managing your own downside, understanding what you need to get you through 6 months, a year, whatever it might be. You know, because if you've got, I don't know, $10,000 and you're sat in, or pounds, and you're sat in your bank account currently, and you're thinking, how and where do I want to invest this? And you move it into Bitcoin or wherever you move it into, and it drops, you're going to wish you'd actually left it in there, you know, and you moved it all because you're kind of willing to play a bet. Then you actually would have wished you'd actually left some in the bank, right? Even though that's kind of like a massive anathema to everything we talk about in terms of fiat money and all those things. But your circumstances are your circumstances. And so it's really about understanding first and foremost, as part of the module that you're talking about in terms of the course, is like, well, what do I need? What's my personal financial circumstances at the moment? What do I need to live? What are my assets? What my job? All those different things, and building a picture of that, because then you'll know of that $10,000, for example, that's set in your bank account. Well, actually, I need to leave X amount in. Fear got drilled into me last year was that in terms of you're sort of building an unbanked portfolio. At the moment, I had far more money in the bank account than I do now in terms of just where it was last year. Is that you still probably, well, depending on your personal circumstances, it did for me, is that I still want to keep some actual cash for my living expenses actually in the bank. Shock horror, right? You know what I mean? Sorry, but that's my personal circumstances. So we've talked about Simon Dixon often here, and he sort of looks at it from that perspective, which is like, what are my personal circumstances, and what if the worst happens? Okay, let's mitigate that risk first. My living expenses are X, so therefore you want to keep potentially that in cash. Now that is, what happens to cash and inflation wise and all that, you can't control that, but you might want to actually keep some. I think Paul mentioned it earlier. Paul Bond, you keep some cash. You look at a situation like Brexit, and you can try and mitigate around a set of circumstances. So you might want to keep some cash in, but then what's a period of time that matters to you? Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? Is it 12 months? And then from there, you break it down and you start thinking about, okay, if I want to unbank, I move a portion of that from my bank account into some other things that I now believe in are potentially going to grow in value, or potentially going to hold the store of value. It might be gold, might be whatever. And so you might want to put some into metals. And then you might want to then say, okay, this is my crypto portfolio, and your crypto portfolio will be broken down however you want it to be broken down. But there's a sequence of events there that and thought processes that are really, really important to kind of go through to take the place. Because right now, we've had a crash, but the market's recovering as far as we saw today, right? There's been a few things happening, but it's like this sense of FOMO at the moment of like, I'm missing out. And we feel it as well, right? We talk about it all the time. It's like, I'm missing out on X, I'm missing out on that. But you have to come back to what's your set of circumstances, box certain things off, because you're not going to feel like you've missed out potentially if you've boxed your own personal circumstances off and you've now investing in unbanking, basically. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. But I want to speak for the people who hear that and go, "Fuck, that sounds like a lot of work," right? Because it is a lot of work, and I think that if you spent a lifetime putting your money in a bank, you don't do anything.
Yeah.
This is what I mean about convenience. We're so used to we're so used to convenience that we think when it's not there, it's really, really hard. Like if we all had to go on, if all the meat we caught, all the meat we ate, we each had to go and catch, you'd soon realize how much effort and time that takes and everything. Or there's just so many factors of convenience that we don't even know the other side of it. We're just so used to it being presented to us and we receive it. So part of the thing around any sovereignty, claiming yourself, requires work, usually a bit of inner work as well. In and around money and with our finances requires a little bit of practical work outside of stuff. And then when you mix it with this weird feeling people have around money, like so many people don't like money, or the same way when they go, oh, money's, we look at phones and we go, the phones are evil and look what they've done to society. The money and the phones did nothing. It's always human beings. And I say this every single week. But the sooner we have a better relationship with it, we can have a better relationship with everything. Because if we, at a quantum level, if we're all one with everything, then money is within that equation as well, just like a rock is and a waterfall and other human beings. So when I hear Richard share all that then, and even though I nod my head and I agree, I still feel within me, and I'm like, I'm picturing some people that are on this call and other people. I'm like, it's a lot of work. But if you, I think it was Simon Ditchin who said this. Bitcoin is a proof of work system, which means by definition, to make it validate, to check its integrity, machines do a lot of work. You could argue that financial sovereignty is a proof of work system and crypto is a proof of work system. It means the more work you're willing to put at it, which basically means the more inconvenience you're willing to harbor, the greater the end result. If you don't want to have the inconvenience, therefore by proxy, by elimination, you're having convenience, you get what's served to you. That's it. Whether that's a government going, we're going to take everything over 100 grand, we're going to take. I thought Greece took 10% of everyone's bank account. I didn't think they took everything over 100 grand. I might have misunderstood, Paul. Or it might have been Cyprus then. Somebody one day as a government went into everyone's bank account and just took 10% out. England didn't do that, but we quantitative eased for years, and now what did cost £100 costs £130. So you could argue I'd rather have taken the 10% hit than secretly inflated money and purchasing power to the point that everything cost me more. But the point is that the convenience and inconvenience, everything is just shared there. It can easily be seen as inconvenience. But go back to my original question. If you start to think things that you did trust, now you don't trust them as much, at what point do you take action? At what point do you do something? I don't care what it is, whether you want to go and march on a street, write a letter, meditate, move your money, say I love you to people that you haven't done and forgive people, doesn't matter. But at what point do you do something? Because then when you start to do it, that's the day you're claiming sovereignty. That's the day you're like, I choose myself as a human being on this earth to do something about the thing I see in front of me. And we all draw that line at different spaces. And when we do draw that line, you then start entering into what Richard just shared about there, like taking serious stock of where is it? Where am I going to put it? Why am I going to put it there? How am I going to check up on it? So I would love to segue now into actual living. So we've all got our money in different places, and earlier on, obviously, we talked about diamonds, other precious gems, precious metals, basically physical, transportable things. Someone mentioned art. I know some people buy bottles of red wine, or wine, let's say, collectibles, all of these sorts of things. There's various things you can buy from the big to the small. All I would say is, like any of them, Paul said, don't buy off eBay because you don't know what you're buying. I also will be very cautious of buying things you don't understand. I personally am not going to invest in art and red wine. I'm just not. I can't. I don't know it enough to put my money into it. But I might work through a hedge firm, or there's a company we know who groups properties together. So you can buy leases. He has a hospital fund that has like 80 hospitals in 13 different countries across 11 different currency denominations. And these hospitals have got 150-year leases. So I've got some money in these funds because I want exposure to property, but I kind of don't want to be in one market. So I see this as easy access to property, massive leases, hospitals pay every single month. If one economy collapses, I kind of think the whole portfolio will be propped up by the others. So I'm aware of these for art as well, and various other forms of assets and collectibles. So you can get exposure to these things in very different ways than actually buying land or property. I just want to share that so people are aware of it. And Kathy said that would be a transparent thought. Love it if you could just put what that was referring to. So so then we're in this world, we've split our money into different places, we're managing it, we're looking at it, we've got our ear to the ground because we treat the finances like a plant. You know what I mean? It's not you, it's just a plant. But it requires some care and some attention and some maintenance and making sure it's not got too much sun, too much rain, too much water, all these things. How do we go about spending it? Which is the second half of unbanking yourself. If you have all your money in a plot of land, it's hard to live, as an example, so you might have some of it. So I don't know, what would be your top way you've got money in different assets that you can live?
Well, again, I think you go back to what it is you personally need. So personally, I've got some cash in the bank that I draw from. I've got some crypto that I skim. I've got the crypto.com card where I've got certain things earning elsewhere, but I use that as a bank, I suppose, and I will chip away at my the portion of my crypto holdings that I put in crypto.com for certain expenses. So I'm kind of like
semi-on-bank.
It's not really trading either. It's just like when some stuff, you know, and I'll chip away an amount per week or per day, depending on how things move. I use challenger banks as well. So we always talk about Revolut and Monzo. So spending those.
I would call a neobank.
Yeah, and I don't hold a lot in there, but I'll move it into there depending on what I need to do and how I want to.
So you're talking about here. You're talking about still using the banking infrastructure to have that easy access, but your money isn't necessarily sat in all those banks. You're just using the facility.
Yeah. So it's like you create a funnel system basically. Yeah. So you got, you know, income from here, income from here, income from here, and depending on how you need to spend it, like so crypto.com, it won't let you use it for sort of prepaid purchases and stuff like that. So that's an inconvenience.
So prepaid purchase?
So I'm pretty sure I've never been able to use crypto.com on Amazon, for example, to make a purchase on Amazon because they don't take the payment there and then. They'll wait till it's shipping and then they'll take the payment. So if you don't, so they don't. That's not been my experience of Amazon so far on crypto.com. So it's unusable that way. You're not going to get a good interest rate or fee-based structure if you want to withdraw cash, essentially on crypto.com as well. So anyway, it's just the funnel way of moving money using some of the system as it is.
Like I use TransferWise to send to Spanish Mexican people out here, but I don't keep any money in the TransferWise, so I will send it. It will be sent on. So I'm just using the facility.
I've also got TransferWise card as well, so that's another one where
So in this instance, what we're talking about here is you can use. Richard's chosen to maintain, let's say, a banking relationship, to use those facilities, but that's a difference to where the assets are held. Okay, so that's somewhere that sits in the middle. If let's bring Heather into this. Heather is used a lot on this call. I hope she's using it in the correct way. This is the thing, though. If you don't make it on the call, you're now an archetype. So Heather's our archetype. Heather wants to unbank herself because she does not believe in the banking system. A little bit like the Bitcoin family guy. He's called DD. Same again. He moved on to Bitcoin. Didn't think the financial industry was for the betterment of the whole of humanity. So said, I'm going to be my own experiment. So for these sorts of people, they might choose to not use that service. In fact, I know that DD does, because DD uses a crypto.com. How he differs them is he doesn't have a bank account. A bank account offers certain features, and they can lend on fractionalized lending. So you put $100 in, they can lend out $99 of that. Crypto.com, I'm pretty confident doesn't do it. It's a prepaid card. That money.
It goes back to that thing originally I said, where there's an unbanked as an informal term for adults who do not use banks or banking institutions in any capacity. Unbanked persons generally pay for things in cash or else purchase money orders or prepaid debit cards. That's kind of what I'm doing. It's like I'm not holding it in a bank account. I've got some in a bank account. There's my personal security. But those are just tools. The money doesn't sit in there. It sits elsewhere, whether it's in crypto or gold or whatever it is, and you just move it, because eventually most places you need to spend that money, right?
And all this presupposes, is a term Rebecca used earlier, liquidity. So does anyone hear this word liquidity and it's still not hit them what it really means? Anybody not understand liquidity? We talk about how liquid something is. All good? I'll assume so. So then when we're thinking about, for example, the houses and the land aren't liquid, they're also not tokenized. So a land is let's say a building for the most part. You sell a building, that's it. But one of the things that's coming within crypto is you can take this building and tokenize it and fractionalize it into 50,000 mini shares. And now you can sell those shares. So as soon as you tokenize an asset, now it's tradable. Yeah, like I can sell a few bricks worth. I can sell this, I can sell that. Crypto definitely can allow us to do that. So I think that if we're looking at unbanking yourself and you're thinking about the spending and the living of life, you have to first look at where are those assets, the first part of this call, and how liquid are they? So Rebecca talked about Zort. So Zort sat in Coinbase, it's being traded, but it pretty much is held in USDC. So at any single point, if you've got 50 grand in there, you've got access to all of that. If you've got 3 grand in there, you've got access to all of that. And it should be, assuming that the economy's fine, we haven't had a collapse of the dollar, the value is the same. If you had a lot of your money in Bitcoin, yeah, it's liquid, you can sell it, but you might not want to sort of sell it if Bitcoin's dropped down to 30 grand if you bought at 50. So it's liquid, but it's volatile.
I think DD from the Bitcoin family, using him as an example as well, he'll look at his entire pot, which is mainly sitting in Bitcoin, and he'll have 80% of it that he's never going to touch. 20% of it is his liquid Bitcoin. That's what he trades. That's what he does, whatever else he does with it to make it work for him based on his personal family circumstances. So he's decided what his personal circumstances are. He's going to hodl for dear life his 80% is his Bitcoin, whether it goes up or down. The 20% is what he's deemed is going to maintain his lifestyle. And so he will trade in and out based on his own decisions and what the market's doing. So it is liquid from that perspective.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. So if you didn't want to use a crypto.com card, crypto.com requires KYC. To be fair, any banking card offered by a crypto service will need KYC, know your customer. That means providing passports, identity. So let's assume for a minute, Heather doesn't want that either. So then we've got all these assets that are liquid and semi-liquid. Where do they go? one of the age-old ways that we've ever dealt with money is P2P, peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer is, you know, I'm going to visit Kathy, and I'm completely unbanked. I go and visit Kathy, we'll chat for a little bit. I've got enough in my world to spend. I've got enough cash moving around. And I might do a deal with Kathy privately. We trust each other enough where she wants some gold. Maybe she wants some crypto, whatever she might want. And in exchange for that, she could do anything from give me some cash. She might go to the local store and buy a prepaid card that's got no identity on it. I might say, oh, I'm flying next month. Can you buy my flights? Basically, I'm doing a P2P, peer-to-peer relationship deal where you just trade it. This is what I've got, and we negotiate something and we exchange it. And P2P is still used a lot within crypto. Again, it's not super convenient. You've got to find people and know people. But I will be honest for myself out here, there's a never-ending stream of people on both sides. There's people with cash who want to get into whatever asset, and there's people that have got loads of the asset and they want cash. And it's a layer within society that most people don't even realize goes on and is happening, because if you don't need it or you're not looking for it, you can just walk through the streets and meetings and never experience it. But if you lived in that world where P2P transactions are important for you, you'd always have your radar on. A bit like property investors are always looking for the next deal. As soon as someone's like, oh, I'm thinking of selling my property, straight in, just to feel it out a little bit, because you get first dibs on it. And that's totally normal for that opportunistic side of ourselves. So P2P is definitely a very safe and stable way, at least for now in the foreseeable future, that you can move in and out of any asset.
I'll be interested to know, because it being in this environment here, it feels more natural because of the environment people are in and what assets people have got. And Mexico, you can pretty much get, you know, there's a way around something all the time, right? But most of the people here are sitting in sitting on this course, sitting in the UK, where I was just hearing that and knowing if I was sitting in the UK, like our conditioning sort of makes us say, how do people actually feel about that?
You mean like that sounds a bit sketchy, dodgy?
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
And it's really not, because it's a trade at the ultimate day. I've got this, I want to swap it for that, and there's a need. You've got a need on this side and a need on that side, and all you're doing is peer to peer. You're just transacting based on what you agree, not on what someone else agrees. I'm interested, as a show of hands, basically, how people would. Does that sound dodgy to people?
Well, is that the question then? So
yeah, just quickly, I'm just interested to know, just as a feedback loop there. Yeah.
Okay. So you're looking at unbanking yourself. Does it sound? Raise your hand if it sounds a bit. If you're anything uncomfortable or further about a P2P transaction.
Assuming you can trust the person.
All right. Got
Yeah,
trusting
cool.
group.
All right, that's fine.
and what one of our mentors used to say to us, both of us, he said, trust always has been and will always be the ultimate form of currency. And he said, if you can go through your life gaining, building, and storing trust, he said, you'll never have an issue. Everything else is built on top of that. And if everything collapsed, you would always be left with trust. And you all know people right now that in a time of need, whether it's a shoulder to cry on, 50 quid you need, a bed for the night, whatever, you've all got some people that you could call at that time. And those people wouldn't even bat an eyelid. They'd be like, sure, because you have built up a level of trust that is greater than whatever certain needs are. And I think that this whole thing about P2P just takes us back a few steps, like going back into people that are unbanked. But at the same time, it's moved us forward. It's kind of brought the trust we used to have, and then trust got not needed because banks did it all for us and governments did it. And then we've come full swing again, and now we're back into understanding and realizing why trust really is so beautiful. And that's the basis of P2P at the end of the day.
Again, it's hassle, but the hassle is being commoditized by banks to make it easy for us to transact. But if you go back to trust and trading, you know, it's a little bit more hassle, but you're back to a place where it feels better for you potentially.
So sticking on this theme, we're coming to the end in a minute though. So we've got this unbanking of doing things ourselves. How does somebody pay for direct debits, utility bills, I'm gonna put rent into there. Now this depends on how you choose to live. You live in Mexico, everything's cash. Everything's cash. You can do card as well, but guaranteed everybody takes cash. You can even go to the local store on the corner with your electricity bill and pay it in cash. You can do pretty much everything at the local store here.
Or Bitcoin.
But not at Oxford. Probably at some point.
I haven't done that yet.
But there are sites online. I've shared them before. It's called BitPay. And BitPay, and there's another service called privacy.com, privacy.something. And BitPay, you can pay for tons of different utilities. You can buy gift vouchers for pretty much every major store online, from Amazon to, I can't think of other stores at the minute, all sorts of different bats of companies and Walmarts and big brand ones. And they receive all different types of crypto. Now it's not gold, you can't send them gold, but if you had gold, you might take that and move that into your crypto space. And it's one of these things that when you're thinking about paying for services, you're going back to your big question, how much do I need to cover for? So maybe once every 4 months, you would do a big enough transaction to cover you for the next 4 to 6 months. It's not super convenient, but again, that's part of the journey if you're looking at banking yourself. But there are sites and features online which are middlemen that sit between your liquid asset, predominantly crypto, and the thing you want to pay for. There's also people who pay for things for you. Your money's held in escrow. Escrow means a bit like a solicitor. A solicitor holds it until the deal's done. And there's people who actually pay your bill with whatever they want to pay it. The money sits in escrow, and when the receipt comes through that it's paid, it's released. So there's always features and services people will offer. Will you pay 1 or 2% for these things? Of course you will. It's a fee you're paying for anyway. But then when you think about how much inflation has inflated your pounds in the bank in the last 5 years, 1% on a transaction is nothing at all. And then the last one that I think is really interesting that's come to mind is a card called Glint. Glint's it's definitely Europe and the UK. I don't think it's in America, but there'll be similar services. This is a card where you can hold gold on the card. When you go to pay, in that single moment, just like holding dollars but paying in pounds, it finds the live exchange rate for gold to pounds, converts it, and you pay. And again, you pay like 1% transaction fees on that. So that means you could be holding, it can hold pounds, dollars, sterling, loads of different fiats. It doesn't hold crypto, but it holds gold and silver. So you could be moving, you might move 10 grand onto this. It's an e-money card, which means it's 100% insured. This is one of the differences between, what did you call them? Challenger banks and traditional banks. Challenger banks have 100% insurance on all of your funds. And the only time you might lose some money is if a liquidator has to come and just do the spreading of the money out, but it would be like a fraction of a percent. So Glint is a card that can hold gold and silver so that you're holding it in something that's not fiat, but you can still just go and spend it whenever you wish to spend it. So this last little bit is thinking about as you're moving, and if you did choose to say, I don't want to use banks as much, there are tons of facilities and features out there. But the biggest question is what Richard brought up earlier, which is how long am I
liquid for?
Yeah, what's my buffer? Me and Christina over here, we have a buffer of how much. I still use a Monzo card, which is a bank, and we still use a Revolut card. But we hold literally a couple of £100 on it. That's it. It's enough to pay and to live, and every couple of weeks, whenever we need to, we'll top that up. And then we have a place which holds a little bit more liquid that can top these up easily. And then every few months, we'll top up this part with something bigger, a bit like Didi, the Bitcoin family guy, said he keeps 20% available. So these are the sorts of questions. It's not as convenient, but it suits the lifestyle that we choose we want to live. So I think when you're looking at unbanking yourself, you have to really also bring in what level of inconvenience, or rather, where am I going to draw the line at my new convenience? Like, what am I happy with? And that will really dictate where you're going to move to with it.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's first and foremost spreading things out which makes sense to you. and rethinking your bank accounts potentially as funnels. And so you're never holding anything in one place. You're moving money around, but it's to the level of your convenience as you need it with its cash, whether it's paying for stuff in the shop, paying for stuff online, or paying for bills. Because you still, if you need to buy stuff on direct debit, you're still going to need a bank account. At the end of the day, you're still going to need a sort of traditional bank account. But the choice is how much money you're going to keep in there, and how would you manage. Are you going to keep it in there and let it be drawn down, or are you going to move stuff there via your funnel system in order to make sure that it's just debiting, and that's all it's there for. You're not giving the bank anything. You're not creating any risk. It's just there for a service to fulfill a direct debit option.
We should have a bank account, and I know exactly to the penny. It's fixed direct debits. I think it's £587 comes out of it every single month. £590 goes into that bank, and at the end of the month, it's back down at like £10, and it goes back up. And I'm comfortable that they're not going to change. So in that instance, that's still a fixed thing. And I don't feel like I'm paying too much into the banking system. I don't agree necessarily with the leverage, and where banks make their money is against some of my morals and values. So, but at the minute, I'm comfortable with that as a solution from a convenience and as I say, an upside and a downside perspective. So, two main points to that. Paul, I'm going to answer your Zort question about APIs. We have a Zort FLT group, just Zort. I'll put it in there because it's a valid question. It's not a stupid question at all, but at least then it's logged as the right place. If you've never done an API before, it can be a bit weird, but I'll do my formal answer in there so you've got access to it. But there's two main parts to this call. The first one is, if we're not trusting the things outside us anymore and the other old school institutions, what can we trust? Where can we put it? Everywhere you put it has an upside and a downside. Just be honest with yourself about it, and really thinking about it. And that takes a bit of time and effort, which means you're willing to accept some convenience. The second part then is, how do I live? My money's not all in a bank, and I'm assuming I don't have a fixed income that I can live off. If I'm living off assets and generate cash generating assets, how do I go about doing that? And where do I draw the line at my new level of convenience that makes me go, I'm willing to put that time and effort in exchange for the value I derive from it? And there's no answer to any of this, but it's good to start to think about it. There are a never-ending amount of increasing signs of economic wobbles, whether it's quantitative easing, whether it's the reverse purchases the Fed's just done a couple of days ago, whether it's timing and how long it's been since fiat has crashed, all sorts of these things, whether you just don't trust governments and banks anymore. There's enough stuff in people's world to make people question things they didn't question 10 years before. So these sorts of a call, just start the expansion process. And remember that thing I said at the beginning, how much do you need to see or hear or feel before you take action? It can be really weird taking action, because you're suddenly, as soon as you take action, you're planting that flag. I now believe in this enough to do something about it. So,
and I'd say just have it, it's moving from one system to another. It feels like a massive deal, and it is a level of convenience that can be challenging. But the same as everything, once you move from a place of where it's comfortable at the moment to be in banking and not think about it, but moving into taking control and giving yourself far more options, you'd instantaneously feel far more comfortable. In the same way that the curtains come up about the trust you might have in banks at the moment, it's just the next stage further from that, and the convenience, the lack of convenience doesn't feel like that because you're taking control back.
That's why I wanted to reframe it to, you're not inconvenience, you're just drawing a new line of convenience.
Exactly.
You might actually deem the banks as inconvenience, because you're like, I have a client who has recently had money frozen. They're trying to move money out, and the bank asked why, and this person told them, I'm looking to invest, and they basically are like, no, you need to prove this, we want to see this information to show that it's whatever they deem to be legal and legit. And this client said, no, I accept the risks. I understand what I'm doing. I choose to want to do this. And they still said no. 3 hours on a phone call. And at that point, you start thinking, whose money is this? And it really starts to wobble things a little bit. So it's good to just be pondering all of that. We are wrapping up now. Apologies for whoever just joined us. Oh, it was whole free. But I would love to get a little bit of feedback of ahas or things, key takeaways, not from everybody, but there's at least 3 people on this call who have had something on this call that have gone, wow, that's really made me think about something. Would anybody care to put their hand up and share so that nobody gets picked on? And I'm going to think, so Melissa's going to speak. Melissa, you can unmute yourself. Come on, 2 people to support her afterwards. Melissa, what would be something that's really just made you, piqued your interest and made you think on this call?
What I really loved was the perspective, I think it was Paul talking about it and you, just really the awareness that now we still have the choice, even though it might be inconvenient to look into different, ways of whatever living and how we, how we're living basically. I think there were so many other details, but just the perspective that we at the moment still have a choice, whatever we're expecting, whatever we hear and, fear maybe, just the awareness, we still have a choice. It might be inconvenient, but not as inconvenient as when we don't have a choice anymore.
Because there's more people not talking about this than there are people talking about it. Just the fact that we're even here, like you said, discussing it is way ahead of so many things. So thank you for that. Awesome. Who's unmuting themselves second?
I'll go.
Go for it.
I mean, I think for me, it was just a nice reminder that I think I've made the kind of right decision when I did to move into crypto, but also the fact that a reminder that need to diversify as well and to look at those options to kind of mitigate those risks and put yourself in that position where you're not just fully in one asset or one investment. So I think that's where I've kind of got to at the minute, and that's the next stage for me, is to start having those kind of thoughts and that planning and those discussions around, okay, well, what am I going to do next? How can I continue this path away from that sort of traditional fiat system? But just the examples that you've given, how yourselves are using traditional banks as a means to kind of keep things ticking over. It's not like you're just completely removed from that. It's about finding what works for you best in your own personal situation and what is comfortable for you. And it's just been nice to have that kind of refresh and just those ideas to start thinking about.
Cool. I like that, Paul. I like that very much. And there's a lot of opportunity right now for everybody. And I think if we can just not get too caught up and carried away in it, you can make life-changing pivots.
Sorry about zooming out and not freaking out and realizing why you're there and just
zooming out, not freaking out.
Yeah.
Where'd you get all these sound bites from?
Nice. Just
Okay, coming to Mr. Sacred Synergy, Paul. I just want to pause, by the way, Paul, and just say that based on how we met each other in Serbia, I love the fact that you're still in my life and on these calls. Just as happy as the day when we first met, and I just love for the circles of things weaving back in, and I just really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you too, brother. Thanks for getting me in on crypto. You're basically the thing that motivated me. I remember you were doing live Facebooks when, like in 2016 and 17 or whatever, when everything was really low, and you were like, "This is the time to buy in." I was thinking, yeah, I listen to this guy. Everyone was saying to you, you shouldn't be doing it. But anyway, the thing that made me think most was when you said about how if the dollar crashes and then the USDT might crash as well. And then the thought about how, if the internet goes crazy, that who knows what's going to happen to crypto. And I hadn't really considered that, to be honest, which is pretty.
There's huge conversations on this. I don't know. I only found out the other day that basically USDT is basically Chinese owned fully in terms of funding and everything, and that it's been this giant I almost want to say Ponzi scheme, but basically the pumping of USDT, everyone then goes and buys USDT. They're taking that and selling that into dollars and basically making their own money and washing all of these funds out of America back out through crypto back into China. And it's been a huge suck of our money. And when I've only understood it this much, but I was like, wow, it's really clever and really implicatory. You know, the implications are huge. So I'm glad that's made you think.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry.
It's made me think about taking profits. Oh, sorry, what did you say, Daniel?
I was going to say that, sorry, there's no answer.
Yeah. We had a big conversation this morning and we haven't got answers yet. So we're not really talking about it other than to sort of keep tuned in, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's good perspective to have in with all the other stuff, you know. So
that word you just said there, though, I want to bring that word into everyone that is a hodler in crypto. And I'm pro hodling. I really am. Holding on for dear life, just keep it and ride it out. But in the event of a big collapse of any description or just things changing, USDT getting banned, like if that happens, that will have a knock-on effect. Taking profits. I used to be so scared of taking profits. When you see things at least at their all-time high, just start to get your initial investments out and take some of that money out of crypto and put it into gold. And it doesn't have to cost you money. You don't need to take your income all the time. Like, yeah, you might miss out on Cardano because it could have gone to $4. It could also drop to $1. Just taking it out and keep redistributing it. And that's why every month it's good to have a review, and every 3 to 6 months or 12 months have a rebalance, which is something we're not talked about a lot, but it is in the 9-part module course that we're very close to launching. It's just things take time, but we're really hoping we'll get it off the ground soon.
Yeah, take profit.
Take your profit. That's the point. I'm stop wittering now. All right, look, 12 minutes over. Thank you guys for staying with us for a little bit longer. We do try and wrap up quickly, but it's always good to just get a little bit of feedback, and that has. I hope you all gained something from these calls and from all the calls. I assume so, because you seem to show up every couple of weeks, so something's doing good because we're not paying you. So that's always really been nice. Thank you, Melissa, for sharing about watching the videos earlier. It's just nice to know that they are of value. It's good to have my bro over here.
Yeah, man.
Very much.
Different sort of energy this time, I think.
Yeah, it is. I've enjoyed chatting to you about it all. So I hope everyone's had fun. If you know people that are wavering and quivering at everything that's going on in the world, maybe they're in crypto or not in crypto, or just scared, we do ask you to share the link to the group. We don't charge, we don't sell anything. We just enjoy the conversation. And ultimately, a couple of people have written some testimonials this week, and it's so beautiful to see the impact it's having on people's lives, even if it is a handful at a time. A handful's better than nothing. So if you do know people that would be interested, please do invite them into the group. You've got full access to do so. Other than that, I'll say goodbye. We'll see you in a couple of weeks' time, and wish you all the best. Look at things as best as you can. Be honest and truthful with yourself, and
ask questions in the group as well. You know, we're trying to encourage, get back to being a bit more active in the Telegram group. So just ask questions away. Community's there. 9 times out of 10, the community can help itself if we can't as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, just keep asking questions.
Awesome. All right, guys. Take care. Big love. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.